Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We will get started here in just a couple more minutes. I'm going to let a couple more folks in the meeting and then we will get going. I'll give it about a minute or so just so everybody, no one misses our intros, and then we'll start.
Okay, I'm going to grab a quick cup of water, and I'll be right back.
Okay. All right, well, for sake of timing, we'll go ahead and just get started this morning. Good morning, everybody. My name is Araya, and I'm the Communications and Events Manager for the Kent Chamber of Commerce. And today we have two wonderful speakers, Dr. Bob Daniel and Kevin Baker. And I'm going to go into a little introduction, but I want to do some kind of rules and regulations on what's going to happen today. So we are recording this event and we will share with our networks. If for any reason anyone needs this information afterwards, let us know, give us a call, give us an email. We'll be happy to share that information with you. We also will ask that everybody stay on mute, and there will be a chance for questions and answers, or if you have any questions in the chat, we'll try to make sure that Kevin and Dr. Bob has access to viewing that to ask those questions. So we'll go ahead and get started today. I'm going to go ahead and introduce both of our speakers. Today we do have Kevin Baker. Again, he is currently the Director and Analytics to Discover Northwest. Kevin has 20 years experience in higher education, administration, and assessment. He has overseen large-scale projects involving 30+ faculty and has actively led faculty pools on both coasts. Additionally, for the past 5 years, he has been involved in regional and accreditation incentives for one of the largest institutions in North America. Kevin publishes academic articles in the field of biblical and ancient languages. He's going to speak with us today. Also, Dr. Bob Daniel is considered an expert in the areas of organizational behavior, career transitioning, and leadership development. Bob has led strategic roles in the media, technology, government, and military, and higher education sectors. He has a doctorate in higher education and organization change, which was complete as an adult learner. With a family and demanding full-time position, Bob's book on career transitioning is scheduled to be published early next year, and he works with the University of Phoenix and Discovery Northwest to help people achieve their education and professional goals. So again, today, our speakers will speak with us today, and I'm going to go ahead and give them the floor.
All right. Thank you, Araya. I'm going to kick it off, and thanks for those that have joined us today. I'm just going to go through the agenda. There we are, a little slow on the stick there. So, okay, so we'll have a little conversation just briefly about who is Discovery Northwest. We'll talk about change and transition. Really, we'll just really kind of give a little overview of it. We'll go over the current state of affairs, which is currently going on, and everybody should know that, but it's always good to put that on the table. We'll talk about knowledge, skills, and experiences, and what that really translates as it pertains to employers. We'll talk about continuing education and training, and even some professional development, what's out there, what we're seeing in the marketplace, and again, what employers like to look at and what they find to be valuable in their day-to-day activities. We'll talk about employment challenges. I'll be honest, there's gonna be a little bit of focus on getting work as a more mature. I'm just being PC or more mature adult. There's some challenges that are involved in there. I'll give some tips and some overviews on how to kind of navigate that. And then finally, I'll give you some what I call the first steps, useful ideas and tips that you can actually put into place without really a lot of time and effort. And then finally, we'll close with some comments and then some Q&A. So I'm going to turn this over to Kevin, and he's going to talk about Discovery Northwest.
Thanks, Bob. Hi, everybody. I'm Kevin Barker. I'm Director of Analytics for Discovery Northwest, and I just wanted to give a few quick bullets on what Discovery Northwest is. I don't know that anybody's heard of the organization before. Maybe somebody has. If so, fantastic. We are located in Kent, Washington, so an aggregate of experience over leadership at Discovery Northwest, 65 years of expertise, proven success, right? Experience in higher ed, career transitioning, and then leadership in a business setting as well. So we basically offer two sorts of solutions, sort of maybe one on each side of an equation. Solutions that are focused on individuals, right, that need career repurposing, which is in fact what Bob will be talking about today, and transitioning. So training, education, coaching, advising. When I say education, I don't mean degree programs. I mean sort of micro certificates, micro credentialing, these types of things. Not bachelor's degrees, master's degrees. And of course, the other side of the coin is solutions for organizations themselves. We work through cultural performance systems issues, not IT systems as such, but internal processes and systems, and effectiveness, which is a common word in education in terms of institutional effectiveness. So those sort of two buckets that Discovery Northwest covers. And again, they're complementary. So I will turn it over to Bob. And thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so thanks, Kevin. So we're gonna just briefly talk about change. I feel like we're all experiencing that, and as you probably saw on the previous slide, I noticed a little glitch in the slide, and I actually changed it really quickly on the fly because that kind of stuff bothers me. But in reality, people react to change. Really, I mean, and this is the model that most likely you have seen before. If you haven't, you might even be experiencing it and don't even know it. This was actually put together by a gentleman at Boeing maybe about 15, 20 years ago. And it really kind of goes through the responses that we deal with change over a period of time. And I just want to be clear, the time frame is, there's no set limit on what that could be. Some people experience and deal and react to change over, months and, weeks, and others deal with it over years and sometimes decades. So it's good to put this out on the table because, for one, I like people to understand like what is actually happening to them on kind of a very basic level. Now, the other part about changes, which I think is very interesting and sometimes we don't think about, is what there is really the way the Chinese ideogram for crisis is really made up of two separate symbols, and those symbols, actually one means danger or hidden danger, and the other one means hidden opportunity. And if as human beings, we know that we either look at the glass half empty or half full, and experiencing change is pretty much the same way. You could knee-jerk react to it, and it can cause you to, recoil, or you can, maybe initially react to it and then look at it as a kind of a opportunity going forward. And so everybody rises to their own, levels of comfort. And the reason why I put this up here is because I just like to level set the bar across the board. We're all dealing with change, and we're all dealing with it in our own way. But it doesn't necessarily always have to be bad. There always can be some opportunities that come out of it. And that's really my approach in today's presentation. So that being said, I want to talk a little bit about our current state because, again, I think it's important to kind of put this out on the table. And nothing here should be surprising to anyone listening or watching me today. We know that the pandemic continues to surge. We know that the governor has instituted additional restrictions, and we know that the impact on that, whether you're a small business owner, a consumer, somebody going to school, I mean, it's across the board. We're all dealing with that. If you weren't aware, the state of Washington actually leads the nation in new jobless claims last week, while the national claims number dropped. And that was somewhat surprising to me, given that our economy is always seems to be a little more robust, over the years, and even a little bit through this experience. But the bottom line is that we did experience that last week, and here are some of the areas that were really hit hard. Manufacturing, healthcare, government were definitely impacted. What I thought was really interesting is that tech firms, their claims jumped 151%. and finance and insurance, 223%. Pretty significant, bumps along the way. We know that job loss is definitely it's definitely been higher in communities of color, and during the last 6 months of this pandemic, older workers were 17% more likely to become unemployed than their younger peers. So that I thought was, again, some interesting stats. Again, level setting here. If you know this, that's okay. It's part of that change process. And here's the one that, again, which is really interesting if you think about it, is that local home sales and prices continue to surge. So despite all that what's going on here, the day-to-day costs of housing and the associated costs with that continue to rise as the pandemic has impacted our own revenue stream. So anyhow, that's the current state, as you guys know. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about is that despite all that's going on, employers are still looking for employees, and they're seeking those skills that they feel are needed for anyone to be successful in their workplace. And the key thing that we're hearing, and this has been a ongoing issue, or not, I should say issue, but an ongoing option, is that transferable and portable skills are still highly valued. So transferable skills are those skills that you have gained in probably another industry, experience, field, and being able to use those either in your current position or a future position. And so employers now are not just locking in on did you work in this sector or that sector. They're really starting to look at those transferable skills. And so one of the things that I like to do is I kind of like to break this up a little bit. So what is the most desired, COVID, post-COVID skills? What do they look like? And so adaptability and flexibility have, obviously when we talk about change, your ability to kind of navigate and really deal with the unexpected along the way has become a valued skill. Customer service, as we've seen in this pandemic, the needs for services are out there in certain sectors. For example, in e-commerce, Amazon is definitely ramped up, their options to be able to provide consumers with, products almost like, it feels like in about 2 hours or less. But that involves a certain type of customer service skill. And so those types of skills now become even more to the forefront. Not that they weren't before, but they've become even more accelerated or more accentuated when I'm talking with employers. Tech savviness, this doesn't mean you can, turn around and, take apart a laptop and put it back together in 30 seconds. This just means things like, how comfortable or proficient you are with Zoom, virtual technology, Teams, anything and everything that has to do with communication in the tech-related field is of a valued skill. Communication has always been there, but again, if you've been always day-to-day on site with someone, and now all of a sudden now you have to convey your thoughts and your ideas via either virtual or electronic communication, and that's really your only way to connect with folks, that becomes a skill. Creativity, innovation, everybody's trying to figure out how to get in and around this in the most quote unquote non-traditional ways. Critical thinking is, again, been a very sought after skill, and it really is that type of skill that allows someone to do things that maybe others have missed or maybe others don't really necessarily see, and in a way that looks beyond just the work and the task in front of them. And then finally, these are more of things that you can do internally or things you could have, things like leadership. And I want to be absolutely clear. You don't have to be a manager or a person of authority to present or have leadership. We're finding out in our day-to-day activities with the community leaders that the leaders aren't necessarily people with the titles. The leaders are people that have actually stepped up. They've seen that there is a need, and they're taking control and just moving forward and helping lead through that. Emotional intelligence has been one that's been around for years, but again, it's the ability to kind of look through the lens of dealing with people and things like empathy and self-management and the way that you're able to move through kind of systems, and involving people and understanding how to interact with them. And then finally, what we're hearing most importantly is that, are you taking the time to really be a lifelong learner? Are you committed to developing yourself over, whatever that may look like? I know that there's been an influx, including, this webinar, of webinars throughout, especially if you're working from home or home because of you've been displaced or whatever that may reason. A lot of folks are, running to LinkedIn Learning. They're watching webinars. They're being part of panels because it's virtual. You don't have to drive to anything anymore. And so that commitment to, lifelong learning and what that demonstrates and showcases to potential employers is a value to them. So I'm going to pause and see if Araya has got any questions in the chat or anything, or
Not at the moment, Bob.
okay. So the next thing I want to really talk about is, continuing education, training, and professional development. And the one thing I want to make clear is that sometimes when we talk about education, and I think Kevin alluded to this, we get into this discussion about education and vocation. And in my world, I'm in education, but I definitely support vocation. So vocational skills are, in my mind, are equally as important as educational skills. There may be some fields of study that you want to get into, or career paths you want to get into, where a vocational skill is going to provide you much more lift and much more opportunity than, let's just say, an educational credential or something like that. It really depends on what you want to do and what career path you want to go. But again, that's more of a personal choice and a personal direction. But if you're thinking about exploring any of these options, what could you possibly gain? And that's really kind of the key point of this slide. So the first 2 points are, the required credentials and certifications. Prior to COVID, one of the things that the state had put out from their economic boards, it said that by 2021-22, 73% of all jobs in the state of Washington will require some post-secondary credentialing. They weren't very specific about whether that would be an educational credential or a vocational credential, but it only stresses the point that that's some of the things that employers are going to look at. The other thing that you could possibly gain is marketability. The more skills you can share, the more vocational education or traditional education you have, and that is just a benefit for you. It gives you an opportunity to promote your brand and go forward and let people know who you are and what you stand for. There's a next tier of possible gains include increased promotional opportunities and or higher income. Statistically, the more skill sets you have, higher education that you have, your income goes up accordingly. And also the other piece about, continue ed and vocational and training and professional development is that it does allow you to be promoted inside your organization. As somebody who has, hired a lot of people over the years, when we're having those discussions, especially with internal candidates, the one thing that we would ask is, what are they doing to, improve themselves, better themselves? And I have to say, if all things are being equal, we will look for that person that may be taking, that time on their own to, get more training and skills that not only apply to the work that they may be doing, but may apply to the work that they could be doing or want to be doing in the future. New and enhanced skill sets go without saying. That's generally what you get when you learn more things. Again, you need to market those to make sure that people know that. And then the other two pieces, which I think is really key and we sometimes miss out, is, setting an example, for others, right? And so as somebody who had gotten, my first degree when I was like 35 years old, I was the first one ever in my family, not only to go to college, but the first one to ever graduate from it. And it really kind of set the bar, not just for my family itself, but also for my children and, my friends. And it was just something that even the people that I worked with were kind of, amazed that I would, go through it 3 times. And it encouraged them and inspired them. Not all of them, I'll be honest, not all of them, but encouraged and inspired some of them to want to go out and do the same thing. Maybe they said, if Bob can do it, I can do it. I don't know what they say behind my back, but it did feel like I was able to set an example for others to follow, which humbled me. And then finally, I think the most important piece of all of this or any of this, to be quite honest, is achieving a sense of accomplishment for yourself. Whenever you do something for yourself, it's, and especially something that's going to deliver something for you down the line that has, has value. There is a sense of accomplishment. I know that we live in a world sometimes that we don't get the thanks and the recognition that we need. I've experienced that. I'm sure everybody on this, webinar has once or twice or maybe more in their life. But as I have told people many times over, especially those that are thinking about, taking this path of education, training, or professional development, that if you do this, if you stick to it and you do it, it's going to be one of those promises, that you make to yourself that you actually keep. And every day or every once in a while, you'll look in that mirror and you'll be able to smile back and just remember that. These are things that no one can take away from you. And that's the way that I look at it. So, but it is on you and it is about you. And that's why I think that the sense of accomplishment, at least for me, is one of the biggest things that you'll gain from taking this path. I'll pause. Hooray, any questions at all? Or?
Not at this time, no.
So let's talk a little bit about employment challenges. And as I, referenced in the very beginning, this focus, I know there are a lot out there. I'm really going to focus a little bit on the, what I call the ageism pieces of it. So we could have discussions about other areas, and I'm very well aware that this is not the only challenges that we face in the workplace. So I have this term that I like to use, and it's called iceberg careers and iceberg resumes, because I actually have one. And by that, I mean it's defined as many years of experience that is not seen, recognized, or deemed relevant. As an older adult, I'm in my 60s. I've been in the workforce for 40 years, and we are told that we can only show 10 to 15 years experience, and at best relevant experience, if we put anything on LinkedIn or a resume or anything like that. So, for me, when I thought about that, I tell folks I have an iceberg resume and I have an iceberg career, because nobody really wants to hear about the 25 years before the 15 years that I have to list, right? So if your resume is like mine or your career is like mine, and you're only showing the very top and you have this whole layer that's underneath the water, hopefully this discussion resonates with you, and maybe there's some ideas or suggestions that come out of this that can help you kind of navigate around that. And, one of the things that we do know, and this is an AP report, and it's that older workers, lost jobs sooner and were hired slower and continue to experience higher job losses than their counterparts. And this is just this is during the pandemic. So we know this is happening. It also had been happening before, but now it's even more, pronounced and more, out there. So that being said, I put together some possible tactics, and I'm going to just move this over a little bit because I'm cutting my screen off, to offset ageism while you're seeking employment. So the first thing to do is to watch out for, coded questions and prepare how to answer them. So coded questions are kind of interesting. And again, I want to be upfront. I'm just going to assume there's no bad intent. I think that's probably, for me, the best way I can navigate it. Some people just, it's perception based, and I'm not trying to make excuses for anyone. I'm just trying to say, just watch out for the coded questions. So coded questions could be things like, for example, I had somebody that was interviewing me, and they were kind of referencing like sophistication and seasoning, and I immediately picked up on is that they were kind of referring to my age, right? And so the one thing that I do when someone starts to go down that path is I immediately start to talk about the things that, like if they ask me about myself, I make sure to include the types of activities that maybe they may not deem associated with my age. So I'll say things like, yeah, one of my hobbies is I really enjoy rock climbing. I'm an active swimmer. I really try to avoid, giving them or letting them down that path that I'm, of a mature age group. I've also, and I'll be very candid with you, if someone does go down this path with me, I'll actually ask them what they mean by that. That may cause a little bit of a wrinkle in that experience if you do deal with somebody that goes down that path. But then again, do you really want to work for an employer that has got that kind of mentality? But again, you have to just be aware for the type of questionings that are really kind of getting to, how old you are or what you might look like, as far as in the workforce. And so that's one way you might be able to work around that. Revamp your resume, watch those dates and spaces. So by that, I mean, they often tell you if you've got an iceberg career or resume is don't put dates down. Try to avoid that as much as possible. It's illegal to actually ask somebody how old they are in an interview, but I have seen it happen. You can just blank the dates out, especially for your college or your education or your training. Try to list the most relevant and the most recent dates as possible. If you've got a degree, like my first degree is like in the 90s, I don't list the dates on my resume for it. I just list the most recent dates.
Dr. Daniel, we do have a couple questions. Sorry, I wanted to segue there.
Oh, thank you.
One of the questions is, I hadn't heard the 10 to 15 year piece. Isn't it okay to include those jobs, but keep the information at a minimum?
So I'm going to, let me just kind of clarify what I meant. Most times when you put together a resume, at least from folks that I've worked at are like the career counselors and stuff like that, they tell you to only list like 10 to 15 years of experience on the resume, a relevant experience, like in the body with details. I will tell you that one of the things that I do to offset that, so to speak, is I'll just put other experiences, and I'm not a resume writer, so I don't want to, project that, but I will tell you one of the things I do is in the other professional experiences, I just create another section. I will list the titles in the organizations I worked with no dates and with no dates. So I may have like 4 or 5, especially if they're relevant, because I've been working for 43 years. I'll just list them as that. So I don't know if that answered the question, and I'll pause to see if the person responds back.
She said that was great. I do have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Could you speak about gaps of employment and some solutions that people could move through it to get into the workforce?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'll answer that. The one thing that I think that we're all experiencing, whether you're working or not, is how do you? I get into this later, so I'm jumping the shark here, but I'll just backtrack a little bit. Stretch assignments, volunteer work, especially if you're on boards, internships, anything that you can use to demonstrate that you're actually contributing to something, you could put on your resume. You could also, again, I'm not a resume person, but you could also quantify like what may be in the gaps for. I've seen people do that. But what I found is that people are generally just not sitting around and for 2.5 years or whatever that may be, or 6 to 8 months. They're actually doing other things that, again, going back to my comment about transferable skills and portable skills, if there's something that you're doing, for example, I sit on several different boards. I utilize a whole different skill set. If I was not working right now and I was putting together a resume, I would actually list the boards as things that I'm doing to demonstrate that I'm actually, contributing to something, but not necessarily getting paid for it. So I don't know if that helps, but that's one way I would work around that. I'll just pause if there's any other questions.
He said, thanks. That helped. I see him shaking his head.
Okay. I have I actually go into this a little differently. So if they hold on, there may be some things that can help them. I just want to get back to the spaces piece. So one of the things that I was told that how folks can tell, like they can age you a little bit, is the number of spaces that you have between the period of a sentence or the punctuation mark in the sentence and the next sentence. And they say that I don't know how true this is, but I've heard this from different folks, that if you use 2 spaces, it generally can give someone an idea of when you went to school. And so the proper way is to just do 1 space. So again, tomato, I actually have gone to just the 1 space if possible, but you're just going to have to kind of work through them. Just, again, making you aware of things that you need to look at and possibly putting together a resume. Stay up to date. I mentioned this before. just demonstrate that you've got a commitment to a lifetime of learning, right? So if you're taking LinkedIn classes, or you're going to school, or you're getting a skill set, make sure to include that, on your resume. Make sure you include that if you're interviewed, right? Let folks know that you're constantly in a state of learning. One of the biggest misconceptions about folks that are older is that we're set in our own ways and that we don't know the difference between a cell phone and a dial-up, and that's not true. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to demonstrate that in your own way. So don't be afraid to point out there, yeah, you know what, I just on a webinar about analytics, list it. That is just a good way to kind of, again, diffuse this kind of perception of what an older worker may or may not be like. The other piece of it is that don't be afraid to tout your experience, okay? There's a lot of things that you can bring to the table that a lot of folks don't realize, especially for somebody that's been experienced over a long period of time. In my current role, again, I've been a career transitioner most of my professional career. In my current role, I have to tell you about 50 to 60% of what I do, I've brought in from other parts of my career. And don't believe me, and I work with Kevin, and Kevin knows this. I do let people know that. I let them know it in a very nice way, but I make it clear that, I have experiences in dealing with stuff that may be even outside the scope of my responsibilities, but I'm here to help and share and be that person that wants to help others be, successful as well. So that's just one way around that. In fact, during an interview process, I often tell folks, I usually use words like, I want to be a long-term contributor. And I use the word long-term because I want them to get I want to instill that I'm not going to just work for, 6 months so I can retire. So I will use terminology like that. And I use words like contributor, right? I want to be a contributor. A long-term valued contributor is one of the ways that I kind of use to let folks know that this is what I'm about and this is what I'm going to be able to provide to you. This is a tough one because I tell folks that they have to change their perception one bite at a time. And by that, I mean, one of the things that sometimes, especially for me, is that I feel like I have to change the perception for everyone that happens to be over a certain age. And what I found is that's very, very difficult to do. We know that perceptions are deeply rooted by experiences and past and present. And so it's very difficult to get someone to change their perception about a larger picture, but you can get them to change your perception about you, okay? And that's really what I mean by this, is that don't worry about necessarily at this point in time that they have this perception about the age and everything else. Get them to think and look at you differently, okay? And that's why, again, using very active terminology, kind of moving past the traditional stereotypical behavior that some folks may have about an older adult or an older worker. Worry about that. Worry about them changing their perception of you. And then if you get inside the organization and believe me, if you do this and you rock their world, it'll start to change their perception about everyone they've ever thought of in that particular way. So, but it's one step at a time. And I think that's probably the best approach to this. And then I said this earlier, pick the right employer. There are a lot of sites and a lot of places out there that you can actually go and see reviews about an employer out there. That's one of the cool things about social media. Glassdoor, Indeed, they provide a lot of insight about corporate or company culture. There's a lot of actually other sites out there that you can actually find bits and pieces about an organization. If you're on LinkedIn, one of the things you can do is reach out. If you connected with somebody, if you're not on LinkedIn, you should get on LinkedIn. We'll talk about that later. Is reach out to somebody that actually works there. Ask them about how they like being, how they like being at the organization or whatever. You may not get everybody that will get back to you, but you'd be surprised. People like to talk about themselves a little bit. So that may be an opportunity. You have friends, you have connections. Just reach out. Try to find those employers and that culture that aligns very much with you. And I also want to be clear, I understand that if you need to work because you need to pay bills and get food and all these other things, this may have to take a back seat because you really you have to take care of the greater need. But if you're in a position to pick and choose, try to choose the right company and the right employer, right? It'll just save you from having to do this again and again and again. And then the other thing I want to talk about is, there has been a big push For anybody who's interviewed recently with Amazon, there's been a big push for the behavioral interview process, okay? Understand things like the STAR technique, which is STAR, situation, task, action, and results, okay? Google it, watch the YouTube videos, do whatever you need to do about it. The bigger organizations now are using these behavioral interview type questions. It supposedly helps them, one, pick, try to choose the better or the best employee, the best fit. And also, in a lot of ways, they say, and I have to do a little more research on that it does offset the ageism and other biases by going through this process. It kind of levels out the playing field, again, depending on the proficiency and the level of depth that they get into the behavioral interview process. Amazon does this. They have got it down to a science. Their interviews can be very long, but they do this to basically, save themselves from bringing someone on board that's not going to fit, or may not be ready for that particular position. So I would say if you're going to look for one tactic to kind of explore on your own, take a look at behavioral interview process, specifically the STAR interview technique. And then finally, it could be tough, but if you can, let it go. And this is really tough, and this is really tough for me. It was about 2.5 years ago I applied for a role. Actually, they came looking for me, and I was in the interview process, and it was very immediate that they were looking for a younger, less senior person. And because the questioning, I picked up some of the coded questions and the way that they were going down the path. And I got to be honest, I immediately started being filled with some resentment and possibly a little frustration, and it bothered me. And I did call out some questions and ask them in a different way to get them to kind of get to the point there. But I have found that over time, if you can, and again, if you can, I'm not talking about letting somebody insult you or walk all over you, go into this process and just kind of try to let it go a little bit. Try to do your best to educate people on what you bring to the table and not necessarily your age. And that's a very difficult thing for some folks to do. I know it was tough. It's been tough for me in the past. Again, especially if someone, as soon as they see you or start to dig deeper, they get the sense that you've been around the block a little bit. It can be frustrating, and it can be a little demoralizing. But if you can go in there with the concept, like I said before, which is try to change perceptions one bite at a time, you can kind of mitigate some of those feelings that are taking away from your ability to showcase yourself. So again, it's a tough line to balance, and I'm not here to judge or tell somebody what not to do or what to do, but you might want to take that into account if you want to try to offset some of these issues. So I'm going to pause, Maria, and I'm just going to see if there's any questions.
Nope, not at the moment.
Okay. All right, we're getting to the home stretch here. So here's some, what I call, first steps, tips, and ideas. Some of this was taken from other webinars I've done. Some of it's part of my book that I've done. So I'll just go down the list. The first one then, and I've mentioned this many, many times, is that it really starts with you. You really need to get a good grasp on, what you are, what you bring to the table, those skills, those experiences. Really get a good solid base on those things. I feel sometimes we go on webinars and we sit and we talk with folks, and they immediately want to jump to the resume, and they want to jump to the job search. And I would say start with yourself, right? And I'll give you I have a simple tool you can use. Just start with who you are, get a baseline of what you bring to the table, who you are. And I think that just will set a really good foundation going forward. Part of that is to find and surround yourself with people who have a genuine interest in your success. I like to say these are the types of folks that will tell you have something stuck in your teeth, and they're not going to tell you that you have that little whatever it is, that the tomato or piece of lettuce, whatever. They're not doing it to make fun of you or to belittle you. They're doing it because they care about you. Okay, but they're tough enough to know that if you need to hear something, they're gonna hear it, and it's not about criticism. It's about getting you to be the very best you can be. I'm fortunate. I have people in my life that, you know, who are vested in my success. They really want to see the very best of me, but they're not afraid to tell me that I'm off base. They're not afraid to tell me that maybe I should have handled something a little bit differently. And I'm appreciative of them. And having those folks in your life, and it could be anyone. It could be a significant other. It could be a colleague. It could be a peer. If you don't have that person in your life, I mean, you could probably reach out to someone on this webinar or the chamber or whatever. But it's always important to have someone or many people that will, you know, essentially tell you that all the good that you bring to the table, and also the things that you may need to work on. So that's one of the key tips that I'd like you to take away with you. You take away any of these. I have this little tool that I like to use, and it's called a personal SWOT analysis. So if you've ever heard about this in business, businesses use SWOT analysis all the time. It's called strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, for personal SWOT analysis, and you could do this with a simple, you know, 4 pieces of paper. You can write, you know, on this. I don't like the word weaknesses for personal SWOT analysis, because I look at those, I call them areas for improvement. Weaknesses just gives such a negative connotation, and I'm not a big believer in pushing the brain in that direction. So if you are to put one, you could do this very simple with a piece of paper, 4 pieces of paper. You could write strengths, you know, areas for improvement, opportunities and threats. Not necessarily, you could call it threats or challenges. And on each top of the header, you can put strengths. And so what makes you stand out? And so a lot of folks think strengths are things like, you know, their job descriptions and stuff like that. And I say, no, that's not a strength. Strengths should be things that you're the most proud of, your accomplishments, the things that make you special. And that's why it's good to have people in your life that know you really well, because most of us don't know sometimes the things that make us really special. So this is the process, right? You go through it and you list all the strengths, all the things that you do. And I want to be clear, you don't have to get paid for these things for them to be strengths. Loyalty, integrity, honesty, trustworthiness, those are all strengths. Okay, those are the things that believe me, and you probably know this, that, you know, not everybody has. So don't be afraid to list all these things. The strength section of your SWOT analysis should be or could be your biggest section. Okay, and be realistic. I mean, you know, tying your shoes and chewing bubble gum at the same time, probably not a strength, right? But if you can tie your shoes and chew bubble gum and write a presentation that 15 people want to invest in your business, that would be a strength. Okay, being a little, you know, facetious here, but my point is, list your strengths and don't be afraid to list a lot of them. For areas for improvement is what could you or want to do better. Okay, these are the things that you might consider like skills gaps. Right. So I mentioned before that tech savviness is one of those things that, you know, employers are looking for. So if you're struggling a little bit, you know, with Zoom, or maybe, you know, how to communicate effectively in a virtual environment, or maybe, you know, Excel or PowerPoint, whatever that may be, that be something that you want to improve upon. Okay. If you've got other types of gaps that you're seeing, you're in fact, maybe you're interested in, maybe you're currently working and you're looking to work in your different department, or maybe you're looking to take that next step up. What would it take for you to get that? Would it be a stretch assignment? I mentioned before, for somebody asking this question about how to do, you know, gaps in your resume. Is it a volunteer? Is it volunteerism? Is it, you know, working on panels? Is it working with, you know, nonprofits? Anything that you can do to kind of get you where you want to be. Okay, that's the delta between where you are and where you want to be. That's an area for improvement. And it could be other things. It could be personal things. It could be again, that's really up for you to decide what that looks like. But I want to say one thing. If your areas for improvement starts to become a really, really long list, it shouldn't, right? You should really only focus on maybe the top 3 to 5 things in that area. Okay. The human brain really can't comprehend the negative. And so one example I said, if I told you not to think about an elephant right now, probably elephant comes right into your head, right? And by that, what I really want to say is, don't worry about the negative, so to speak. Try to affirm the positive. So think about the things. So if you're like, for example, if you say I can't present on a webinar, your areas for improvement is that how can I become better at presenting at a webinar? Now it's just a twist of words, but again, it's more positive and puts you in the right frame of mind to want to go do something about that. The other one is opportunities. Again, this is one area most people struggle with. They're like, well, what are my opportunities? And that's why I asked, do you have a network of strategic contacts? 75 to 85% of all employment never hits the Indeeds of the world, never hits the job sites, okay? It's held within that organization. And you may know somebody, or somebody that you know may know somebody that can help you get your resume and get in front of somebody to talk about, even have, informational interview with somebody. So really start to look at your contacts, okay? I'm not saying you can't have just friends or contacts that can't bring you anything other than just friendship or acquaintanceship. I'm just saying, look at your network and see if you can expand on that. There is a lot of opportunity within opportunities with people you know. I've seen people, I got to tell you, I am hit up all the time by somebody either asking me if I know anybody looking for work or asking me if I could help them find work. So it's a good thing to have. It's actually, it will help you if you get the right network. These could be folks that, have a genuine interest in your career path or your career success. So it's good to build that network and just continue to build on it. Another area of opportunity some folks miss is if you're currently working, if your employer provides, educational or vocational benefits, whether that may be professional development, or be going back to school, then maybe going, to get additional skill sets. Sometimes employers don't really do a great job of letting their employees know that these benefits are available to them. I'm in the field. I talk to a lot of folks that are not aware that in some cases, they get a substantial amount of money if they want to go back to school. They might have to jump through some hoops for it, but there may be some dollars and that could help you, or even training programs that could be available to you that can help you get where you need to be. And the final one is, threats and challenges. And these could be things that you may not be aware of. For example, how well do people or companies understand what you can bring to the table? I work a lot with military, and especially for folks that are transitioning out of the military. And like any industry, any sector, everybody has their own acronyms, their own terminology. And sometimes employers don't understand exactly what that job entails that someone might have done in the military, or role they had, or the experience that they had. So there's a little bit of a challenge to make that disconnect, and makes that disconnect happen or not happen. And so just take a look at maybe how you're conveying your skills or your experience or even yourself to others, and look at what that may be and how you may be able to overcome that. And there's other things of it as well. I mean, I've worked with individuals that, for whatever the reason, they had some, personality challenges. Either they, cut people off when they talked, or they, they shut down if someone gave them any type of feedback. And so, again, it's just working through the things that, just recognizing those types of challenges you need to overcome so that people can see you for what you are, and you can showcase your skills and experiences across the board. The next piece of this is, after you've done this SWOT analysis, and you can put together a little plan that really just kind of shows how you're going to utilize your strengths, seize your opportunities, and minimize any areas for improvements or challenges. And the reason why I say to put together a plan is that even if you go through all these processes, they always say those that fail to plan to fail. So put together something. It doesn't have to be a 9-page dissertation, okay? Just a simple steps, right? And just work on it, right? It could be A, B, C, and D. I'm a big believer in visualization. And I'm a big believer that I really like to write stuff down. I don't really like to put stuff in it, and not that I don't, but use it for business, but I really like to write stuff down. I feel that it just helps me connect with what I'm trying to do. That's why I like doing this in pencil. This whole concept of that you got to commit and own your career path. One of the things I often, if I was talking to students or colleagues or staff, I just give them the example of if you know anybody that's rented a car, if you rented a car for yourself, and ask yourself, or somebody who's rented a car, Do they change the oil in the rental car? Do they wash the rental car? Do they put their personal belongings, the thing that hangs from their rear view mirror in a rental car? And probably the answer is no. And the reason why you don't do it is because you don't own it. When you own something, you take care of it. You manage it from end to end. And really, when you're thinking about a career path, making a career transition, and for clarity, a career transition doesn't necessarily mean jumping from one career or organization to the other. It could be a promotion. It could be a lateral move into another organization. It could be a completely different move into another field, another sector. So committing and owning that from end to end will definitely benefit you in the long run, because this is not just something you can do overnight. And I think sometimes what I find is people think they could read a book and it's all over. This is something that takes time over, I don't know, months, weeks, sometimes hopefully not years, but it can take a little bit of time. You're not going to go from 0 to 60 in one day. And I think that's what you need to be prepared to do. But you can do it right and start the good foundation for the beginning and own it as long as you can, and it will pay off for you in the long run. And here's another piece of it too. Ask for help if you need it. I'll raise my hand. There's times I think I can do everything on my own. And I found over the years that asking for help is a sign of strength. It's not a sign of weakness, right? It demonstrates that you recognize where you're stuck and you're trying to get yourself out of it. So ask for help where you need it. There's a lot of agencies, people, associations. The chamber is a great source. It's a great way for you to find, the help that you need. And building your personal brand, I referenced this earlier. If you do not have a LinkedIn profile, you might want to start thinking about putting one together. That is a way that you can let the external world know what you are. And it's, again, it seems like everyone is having those. There's a right way and the wrong way to do that. The right way to do it is I'd rather you go small and have everything accurate and presenting you in the best possible light than go big and, have grammatical errors or inconsistencies and, it looks a little sloppy, because you only get really one chance to make a good first impression. And there are a lot of sites and a lot of, webinars out there about how to build your personal brand and LinkedIn and all those pieces. And so that's another part of that social media, that kind of personal marketing piece, which I think is very important. And then wash, rinse, and repeat. This is a process that is a continual improvement process. Okay. You just don't one and done this. You just don't, start it once and never look back again. You constantly need to go back and look at it. Now that frequency is really up to you. I kind of review things probably on a monthly, quarterly basis. It's just the way that I'm set up. But because we know that things change, right? Who would have known a year ago that we'd be dealing what we're dealing with today, even 8 to 10 months ago. So you always want to kind of reinvent yourself, reinvigorate yourself, look at what's going on, see if you got to make checks or balances. And I think that if you do those things, you're going to put yourself in a much better position. So I'm going to pause. Is there any questions in the chat?
We did have a question in regards to sharing the slide with the folks that registered today. Some people, there's a lot of information and it was hard to take some notes. So we'd like to share the slide, and I can email that over if that's.
I will create I'll turn it into a PDF and I'll send it out to you, Aria, and you can send it out to the group. I have no problem with that. All right.
Do that.
Okay. So I'm just going to, just a quick recap here. So, we talked about Discovery's Northwest purpose and services, talked about dealing with change, what's happening in the area, the closures, the impact, desired and highly valued skills in the workforce, the benefits of education and training. We talk about vocational and educational training, employment challenges and tactics to mitigate them, and finally, some simple ideas and tips you can use to put you on the right path. I'll be candid, there's a lot of information crammed in here in an hour presentation. If we were doing it differently, I probably would have broken stuff out and maybe done a series of these, but you take the time where you can get it. And then with that said, I'm going to open the floor for questions. Here's some contact information, and I will pause and see if there's any questions for the group, or if Kevin wants to add anything.
I'm good.
I was going to say, I don't have any additional questions in the chat. I just have someone just saying the three of us work for WorkSource in Tacoma. And so it's nice to hear this validation as this is identical to what they see and share with their customers. And they thank you for the presentation.
Thank them. I actually work with WorkSource. It's probably somebody I know. And if not, please contact me. Let's talk. I love to work with you guys. So, so there's the contact information. I'll leave it up. I'll also, here's some additional resources as well. So if you're the type that likes to read books or, you know, wants to get a little bit of head start on helping you find yourself, there's 3 books and you can get most of these from the library for free. So I don't, you know, I'm not asking anybody to buy anything. I really like Innovation U. It's not what you think it is. It's not a career book, but it's a really good book to help you discover who you are. Working Identities is all, the person who wrote the book, Iberia, she's always referenced in articles. It's a really, really great book. I actually have it on my shelf, but you can get it from the library free. Skill Finders is, Strengths Finders is, you can get it at the library, but you're not going to be able to get the free code that allows you to kind of find out your top 5 strengths. This was an eye-opener. I worked a lot with government and military. We used this book, and a lot of folks were really surprised what their top strengths were. And then finally, if you are interested in education or educational degree programs and certificates, you know, this is information about the University of Phoenix, which actually is who I work for. There's some information down there. Again, vocational and other types of education, equally valuable. We just don't provide that. And that's what really why Discovery Northwest put together this webinar. So I will, I'll leave that up and I'll go back. If anybody wants to copy this, I'm actually going to send this slide deck out. If there's no questions, I thank you for your time and I'll pause. Kevin, you have any final thoughts here?
No, I mean, nothing to add. You did, that was fantastic covering that. So I mean, I learned as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yes, thank you both, Kevin and Dr. Daniel. We do appreciate you presenting today on behalf of Discovery Northwest. Again, the information will be available on the Kent Chamber website and or our YouTube, and we will send a follow-up email later on today or tomorrow morning with the slides if you guys have any questions with all the contact information as well. Again, we truly appreciate you presenting for us, Dr. Daniel and Kevin, and everyone saying thank you for the wonderful presentation. And that's all we have for you. You guys enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. We're here to help.
Thank you. Bye-bye.